your love. We appreciate you, man. Give it up, 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 give it up. Now I want to dedicate this to Brother David. David is a walking miracle. David is what a miracle looks like. Love you, David. Come on, Trevor.
Our human dignity is a human right. We declare that our human dignity is a human right. We fight to protect that right at whatever cost is required. That means that every election that is up this cycle, a lot of focus has been on the midterm elections for the House, all 435 seats, 1/3 of the Senate, 33 seats, but there are 36 governor's races all across the nation, where the great majority of how we do reapportionment and set the political map for the next decade hangs in the balance by who gets elected in these 36 states. Not only that, the state legislatures that go along with them, that make local and state laws that affect our right to human dignity, are going to hinge on what happens in this election. Not only that, municipal elections where executives and mayors are elected that write the local budgets, that prioritize which parts of the cities and towns get developed to the exclusion of others. Those are happening in this cycle. Our human dignity is a human right, but we must do whatever is required to protect that right, and it starts with voting. So here's what I want you to do. For here we are now 59 days or so from Election Day. It is time for us to mobilize our plan to affirm our human dignity as a human right. Here's what we're going to do. Those of you who have smartphones, or if you're like me, a smarter than me phone, I need you to take whatever piece of technology that might allow you internet access out, and I need you to go to www.vote. When you get to vote.org, for those of you who are watching us on this broadcast or listening on the airwaves, when you get to vote.org, there are a few things that you'll be able to do. Number one, if you're not registered, you can register through that site. Number two, if you're not sure if you're registered, or more importantly, if you know you have not voted in a while and may have been purged, we got to remember that the purging process is now in motion by virtue of the affirmation of the Supreme Court in this last cycle that says if you do not vote for a number of cycles, that can trigger the process that allows states to remove you. Verify that you are registered, and then confirm where your polling place is. The new move of voter suppression is by moving and closing precincts or reassigning them to other places, so that if you show up at the wrong place on election day, they then require you to use what is often called a provisional ballot. It is the tactic that allows the system to constrain our willingness to affirm our human dignity as a human right. I don't know if you've been watching the Judge Kavanaugh confirmation hearings. Senator Lindsey Graham made a statement the other day, and I think we ought to take it and run with it. Senator Graham said that if you want to name the judges, you have to win the election. I said, you know what? He's got a point. But it's not just waiting for a Supreme Court vacancy. If we don't engage in the gubernatorial races, think about this for a minute. We've got gubernatorial candidates, Florida, Georgia, and Maryland. Who's appointing the state judges to the state courts when there's a vacancy? 100 million of the cases that go on in this country happen in, 400,000 happen in federal court. So we've got to make sure that we affirm who's going to name the judges that affirm the state's rights in the age of Trump. Vote.org, register, verify. If you need an absentee ballot, you'll find the rules. But at the end of the day, here's what we will affirm, whatever the cost may be. Just say it with me. Human dignity is a human right. We want livable wages, we want workers' rights, we want health care, we want civic protection, we want constitutional policing, we want equitable development, we want fairness in the process. Human dignity is a human right. Now let's go vote and fight until the victory is ours.
Give it up for Brother Todd Yeary. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. Alabama, 935,000 eligible blacks, 550,000 unregistered. Florida, 1,000,009 eligible, 1,182,000 unregistered. Georgia, 1,020,000 unregistered. Kentucky, 147,000. Mississippi, 472,000. New York, 1,138,000. So we cannot justify doing less than our best and expecting the best. Now I have the opportunity I rather take. I'm just so proud of my son, Jonathan. He is our national field director, steeped in the tradition of our struggle and research and passion for change and for hope. He has been digging into what does this election mean? What does it mean when Mr. Rahm tries to get $10 billion and don't know who's going to pay it back? What do the numbers say? We know he left us. We don't know yet why he left. So we do not know why Rahm left. It ain't just because he's tired. Give it up for Jonathan Jackson, our National Field Director. Jonathan.
Good morning, Rainbow Push. We have had a shocker this past week with the mayor of the city of Chicago announcing that he would no longer seek re-election. To our outgoing mayor, I say farewell, good day, adieu, be gone. In fairness to the mayor, there was a very short election cycle when he sought to seek the mayoral candidacy, that he was a part of a selection and not an election. We've heard the proverb before that you need to look twice before you cut. You need to measure twice before you cut once. You need to look before you leap. What was on his desk then was an enormous task. We had already seen the city going into 7 years of an increasing deficit spending. We understand what deficit spending is. That means you are letting go more than what you are taking in. That means you have too much week left for the money that remains in your pocket. That is why the mayor, the former mayor, Richard Daley, had sold off our parking meters. The former mayor of the city of Chicago, in fairness to Mr. Rahm Emanuel, if I could have approached him then in the interest of Chicago, I would have shared with him that when the mayor sold off 36,000 meters for the price of $1,150 million in revenue, 75 years. Why did the mayor do that? And he said that he was going to put $400 million into our rainy day fund. He went through that money in less than 3 years. He shot right through it. And then what did they do? They continually increased the parking fees and revenues, and the mayor then, Richard J. Daley. These are the things Mayor Rahm Emanuel cannot say, but I'm not in office, I'd be glad to tell you. Then Mayor Richard J. Daley went over to work at the law firm that did the legal work that said, we've signed a 75-year contract that we cannot get out of, that's not in the best interest of our city. You could not do this in a banana republic. You can't sell off public lands and public assets. One of our city founders said that the city One of the things that makes Chicago great is that we have unobstructed lakefront views, 18 miles of it. There are only 3 cities in the world that have such a skyline that's magnificent. And one of the reasons you can't build on it is that they said Chicago's lakefront should forever be free and clear. I've been buried in Chicago. Moving back along to my point. Forever clear is what Mr. Montgomery said, the major retailer for our lakefront. So now what has the city done? By effectively leasing out our parking meters to the year 2083. And all the funds are gone. And what used to be free parking that the city and the state paid for, the curb work, paid for the land, paid for, tried to secure within 4 years for $11 billion. When the city was taking in $20 million, now the private-owned company is taking in $110 million is the best estimate we have, but we cannot get an exact number because it's a privately held corporation. They're putting in meters where there never were meters before. And by the way, when we talk about a tale of two cities, in the words of Mr. Charles Dickens, he wrote that book in 1859. Next year, when someone becomes the mayor of this great city, it would have been 160 years since The Tale of Two Cities was written. Mr. Charles Dickens has something to say about The Tale of Two Cities, a child that had to go work in the factories at a young age. He saw the changing of our society. He saw the industrialization happening. A Tale of Two Cities. He most notably wrote The Christmas Carol. He wrote Oliver Twist. He also wrote The Tale of Two Cities, where he saw the rich in the Victorian, in Paris and in London and in England getting richer, and the poor being driven down. In Chicago today, we are living that tale of two cities 160 years later. Why do I say that? I'm glad you asked. We've got 5 police precincts out of 25 where 52% of all of the murders are taking place. We've got 77 communities, 22 of which are predominantly African American and Hispanic, that are on fire. We've got a police clearance rate of just 16%. Invert that. 84 to 86% of all of the murders in the city of Chicago are never solved. Property values have rebounded where there is an empty and a closed and a vacant school. When he tried to balance the budget on the backs of the children and the poor, Charles Dickens would say that's an ugly twist in the Oliver of Two Cities. Where you've got the lakefront that's businesses that are gleaming. Where you've got 5 neighborhoods in downtown that also now have come since 2000 to 2015 into the wealthiest in the census tracts in America. Well, you've got 25% of Chicagoans now making over $100,000. Well, you've got over 50,000. We got over 52% of Chicagoans now living in poverty. Well, you've got 20% living in extreme poverty. According to the U.S. Census, on the federal level, that's $6,000 a year. Someone has to care about the poor. Point 2, my economic development. What would Jesus focus on? Not just the building, but the man. Not just the building, but the woman. Not just the building, but the child. We do not need to live in poverty, isolation, segregation, and degradation. Violence and trauma. No more of the cover-up. No more of the back scratching. No more of the heavy-handed politics putting your finger on the scale. What do we need? We need an open, free, and fair election. No more tinkering around the edges on the sideline. I said that very finessefully, but let me be very clear with you. Either you get in this or you stay out of this. What do I mean by that? I want to be very clear. I want to not go to the function, but I want to get to the derivative and get to the granular level of what's going on. No more cherry-picking projects for libraries and little schools. Either you think about the all, either you think about the children that need summer work, either you think about the back to school in the beginning of the year and not just coming back to pass out a book pack at the end of the year. Either you get in, stay in, help us, or stay out. That goes for everyone. Let me be clear, I am not running for office. Let me be clear, I live in Chicago. Let me be clear, I pay my taxes in Chicago. Let me be clear, I'm a grown man and I got a right to speak on these issues. Let us be clear that when we see the police department, I don't want my children or your children to have any fear of a policeman. I respect law, I respect order, I respect authority. But I also don't want an officer driving by in his car, leaning out the window, shouting at me in plain undercover clothes, acting like I'm his boy and I gotta turn around. I don't want to see another officer undercover wearing a sweatshirt and a jersey and a police and one of those baseball jerseys with a gun on his hip without properly identifying himself. We need to clean up the thug culture in our policing. When a policeman shoots a civilian, a pedestrian, a child after work, off duty, unsupervised, he needs to be arrested and locked up with a gun on your hip without an identification, winking at a girl, being jealous, and then turn around and shoot someone because your manhood is so fragile. I'm talking about Chicago. This is the city that was meant to be. We've got a Department of Education, Chicago Public Schools, that closed down 50 schools without warning, with a mockery of some process that we didn't even have our voices heard. They closed our schools and opened up the charter schools. And when they came back to school, they could not find 3,500 children. Guys, when we see that these children have been killed, and we have a police force that has been setting up bait trucks, the police department, through the mayor's office, through the superintendent, don't want to assume any responsibility. I don't want to see them try to go to our clergy and pick us off with $1 for a vacant lot that's broken, that there is no economic plan. I don't want to see them putting in all these bike lanes and don't put the bikes on the south side. I don't want to see our children not have their own arena to play basketball, to play football, to play tennis, to play hockey, to run track. I really wish, in closing, we've got to move beyond what's called education. You know, it used to be called human development. A child cannot go a year, cannot go a season without human development. The TIF, those funds that were supposed to be targeted for neighborhoods that were economically blighted, that program has been so bastardized. The rich got subsidized, the poor's paid for it, and no development ever came. Make it very clear to me, Jonathan, I'm glad you asked. When it's harder to get into our top 10 most selective high schools in the city of Chicago, it is harder to get in the top 10 most selective high schools in the city of Chicago than it is to get into Harvard. When now we have made a supply and demand metric and a rubric that says we're going to make sure only a few get education at Whitney Young, at Walter Payton, at Lane Tech, at Jones Commercial. We need to open up opportunity for all. 160 years later, in a tale of two cities, I've lived and I currently live in the South Shore. I've gone to school in the South Shore and the North Shore. And there's a difference between starting your day on the south side heading north than the north side coming south. Look at your morning news transportation updates and you'll see the Jane Addams, the Edens Expressway, the Eisenhowers, the Kennedy, at the very end, bottom of the scale, which is very much consistent with their lack of investment philosophy. Then they talk about the Bishop Ford Expressway, and they never go to the south suburbs. This isn't the message to make you shout. But if you see your traffic backed up, if you realize you can't go on vacation this year because you had to buy a new security system, if you realize you couldn't get your medicine because you had to get a new security door, if you realize you couldn't give something to your child and had to delay giving them a class because you had to upgrade the security system around your house, that means you're subsidizing the policing in your neighborhood. When your house gets broken into, and like my car got robbed in my neighbor's driveway, and I call the police, and the police tell me, you've got to come into the police department to file a report. I said, did you not hear me? Do you not understand me? My car has been robbed. They said, we don't come out to file a report on a stolen car. When my house got broken into, I'm sitting up watching Law and Order and CSI and looking at all these things where the crimes get solved in 30 minutes. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be able to see who broke in my house. It was the dead of winter. You can laugh if you want to. You're about to make me cry. It was the dead of winter, 30 below zero, the wind chill. My house is freezing. Heat's all the way up on full and it's still cold. Day 1, day 2, day 3, no police detective came to the house. I said, you know, this is a joke. How come I didn't get it the first time? I swept the glass up, had it boarded up, and done. Ain't no fingerprints to be picked up on the south side. 3 days later, God bless the officer, he came and told me, Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry that happened, but we've been overwhelmed. We don't have enough detectives on the force. I said, really? He says, yeah. 1 year later, when I went to a funeral and it was made public, I came home, my house was robbed again. I called the police department, and guess what, Dad? I saw the same officer. When he saw me, he just smiled. He said, Mr. Jackson, we still don't have enough detectives. We don't need to be overtaken from the police. We need to declare, Rev, a war on poverty, and let's stop the war on the poor. When we have isolation, segregation, which is exacerbated by our history of closing our transportation down. You've heard it, and I'm going to leave you. You're not what you eat alone. You are where you live. And what's so prophetic about the work of the Reverend Martin Luther King, just not what you eat, it's where you live. But more importantly, it's access to the transportation in your neighborhood. Show me a rich neighborhood. Show me a wealthy neighborhood. Show me a white neighborhood in the city of Chicago where they close the train station. Show me a rich neighborhood. Show me a white neighborhood in the city of Chicago where they don't have adequate transportation. It doesn't exist. Drive down the Eisenhower Expressway, and in the heart of the city, you've got mass transit lines closed down. when you take down a train station on 63rd and Stony Island, when you built out to Waukee, out to Wilmette and to Evanston and to Oak Brook and Oak Park, the Chicago transit system, but you haven't built it out across the city of Chicago. That is racism in transportation. The music is on, and this ain't gonna be done in no 1 week. We are now about to face the best of times. We're gonna have to tighten the belt for the next mayor's office. In his $6 billion budget, where he's got $1.3 billion in policing, where he's got $100 million in annual overtime for policing. What if we did not pay protective capital for police overtime, and every year we had $100 million to go back into the schools, to go back into summer employment? What if? We've got to stop the practice of poop and scoop. What is that? That's where the city of Chicago finances long-term bonds to pay short-term bills. It has us over-indebted, brothers and sisters. And whose responsibility is that? It's mine, it's yours, and we're gonna be the deciding factor, next mayor of the city of Chicago. Either you get in or you stay out. We're gonna take control.
What do you do when you've done all you can, and it seems like it's never enough? Tell me, what do you say when your friends turn away and you're all alone? Tell me, what do you give when you've given your all and seem like you can't make it through? Well, you just stand when there's nothing left to do. You just stand and watch the Lord see you through. Yes, after you've done all you can, you just stand. Tell me, how do you handle the guilt of your past? Tell me, how do you deal with the shame? Tell me, how can you smile when your heart has been broken and filled with pain? Tell me, what do you give when you give in your all? Seem like you can't make it through. Well, you just stand. You stand. You stand. Don't you dare give up. You go on through the storm, through the rain. You go through the heartache, through the pain. Hold on. Be strong. You hold on. Don't you dare give up. Don't you bend and don't you bow. See, the Lord's gonna make a way. Some way somehow. You just stand. You stand. Say you stand. Say you just stand. Hold on and be strong. Say you hold on. Don't you dare give up. Stand. Stand. You stand. You just stand. Oh, just after you've done all you can. After you've done all you can. You prayed and cried. You cried and prayed. You prayed afraid. After you've done all you can, you just stand.
Eric Thomas.
Whoa, yeah, you just stand. God bless you.
Brother, again, but Brother Eric Thomas. Eric Thomas. Say, stand. Stand in the morning. Stand noonday. Stand all day. Stand. Hey, hey, hey.
Oh, yes, he is. Whatever you're going through, hold on a little while longer. He'll be there. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Stand, 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 stand.
Brother Eric Thomas, stand. A profound message from Brother Jonathan Jackson. Song of inspiration, Brother Eric Thomas. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. We have work to do. We meet here on Monday night at 6 o'clock. Organizing volunteers will be going to churches tomorrow, going to street corners and going to shopping centers. 276,000 blacks in this city unregistered, 400,000 in the county unregistered, 200,000 on the books. You change the course of our, say stand and register. Stand and vote. Every high school senior, be 18 by November, is eligible to register and vote now. So every high school senior can vote right now. Every city college student can vote right now. What I want to do briefly, I want to again keep praying for Sister Frances Davis, who means so much to us down through the years. Frances made a transition this week. Those who are sacrificing, give $100 or more. I really need your support today. We have some challenging bills to pay, work to do. You give at least $100, please stand, at least $100. Been in pain, he can't wait to stand up. He want to jump up and just give me a bunch of money, because I know he's able. Been wearing this Sunday, go to meeting suit today. Or you give a credit card, we have one of them swipe machines. Brother DeVille, $100. You give at least $100. You're not here, but give us some money that can. Y'all mess with us. Brother Michael Eady, 100. Kojic, West Side. Vincent Rose, $100. Vincent Rose, my. Look at him. After you got money, give it up, give it up. You get at least $100. I know Brother Pastor, he gave some money, give him the swipe machine. We want some money from United here. Jeanette, you have money. Judge Hill, you give at least $100, at least $100, $100. Brother Z, Go, Sister Jones. Ooh. Doing great things. Yeah. You give at least $50. Please stand. You're sacrificing. Hey, Judge.
10,000 hands.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Oh, I would praise him. I used to praise him. Praise him with everyone. Everyone, yeah. Oh, he keeps on doing great things for me. Doing great things for me. I don't know why sometimes, but he keeps on. Oh, he keeps on doing great things for me.
Brother Stanley, he'll put the stick your stand.
If I had 10,000 tongues, oh yeah. Oh, I will thank him, yes I will. Oh, he keeps on, yes he does, doing great things for me. Yeah, he keeps on, yes he does, doing great things for me. Yes, I found out if I had 10,000 tongues, oh, I would praise him with everyone. Oh,
Keeps on
doing great things for me.
doing great things for me.
Keeps on.
Oh yeah,
Over and over
doing
again
great things
for me.
for me.